The afternoon sun streamed through the tall windows of the international terminal as Dr. Wilson stepped off his flight from Geneva. He rolled his shoulders to work out the stiffness from the long journey. After 3 days of presenting his research to some of the brightest minds in medicine, he was looking forward to getting home, seeing his family, and sleeping in his own bed. The airport buzzed with activity, families reuniting, business travelers hurrying to make connections, airport staff directing the flow of people. Dr. Wilson joined the stream of passengers heading toward baggage claim, his mind already shifting from the conference to the surgeries scheduled for later in the week. He'd need to review his patient files tomorrow. His phone buzzed with a text from his wife. "Can't wait to see you. Kids made welcome home signs." He smiled, typing back a quick reply as he walked. As he approached the baggage carousel, Dr. Wilson noticed a group of security officers scanning the crowd. He thought nothing of it. Airport security was always present, and focused on watching for his black suitcase among the parade of luggage now circling on the belt. He spotted his bag, reached for it, and was about to head toward the exit when he felt a firm hand on his shoulder. "Sir, I need you to come with us," said a stern voice behind him. Dr. Wilson turned to find 2 security officers standing uncomfortably close. The taller one, with a crew cut and a face that seemed permanently set in a frown, was the one who had spoken. "Is something wrong?" Dr. Wilson asked, glancing between them, confused by the sudden confrontation. "Just need to ask you a few questions," the officer replied, his tone making it clear this wasn't a request. "About some missing items from one of our shops." Dr. Wilson blinked in surprise. "Missing items? I'm sorry, I don't understand. I just got off my flight and came straight here." By now, people were starting to notice. Travelers slowed their pace, watching the scene unfold. Some pulled out phones. Others whispered to each other. "Sir, we have reports of theft from our duty-free shop, and you match the description of our suspect," said the second officer, a shorter woman with her hair pulled back in a tight bun. "There must be some mistake," Dr. Wilson said, keeping his voice calm despite the confusion and embarrassment growing inside him. "I didn't even go into any shops. I came straight from my gate to baggage claim." "That's not what we were told," the first officer countered. "We need you to come with us now." Dr. Wilson took a deep breath. He'd been in enough high-pressure situations in the operating room to know that keeping calm was essential. "Look, I understand you're doing your job, but I haven't stolen anything. I'm a surgeon returning from a medical conference. Here." He reached slowly into his jacket pocket. "I can show you my conference badge and receipts from my trip." "Keep your hands where we can see them," the male officer barked, causing more heads to turn their way. Dr. Wilson froze, then slowly raised his hand slightly. "I was just going to show you my ID and conference materials. You can show us everything in the security office," the female officer said, gesturing toward a hallway leading away from the main terminal. A cold feeling settled in Dr. Wilson's stomach. He'd heard stories from colleagues and friends about situations like this, but had never experienced it firsthand. Was this really happening because he matched some vague description? Or was there another reason they had singled him out? "May I at least text my wife? She's waiting with our children," he asked, thinking of his family probably already parked in the arrival area. "After we sort this out," the male officer replied. As they led him away, Dr. Wilson noticed the stares, some curious, some suspicious, some sympathetic. An older woman shook her head slightly as if disappointed. A businessman quickly looked away when their eyes met. A young couple whispered to each other while watching him being escorted away. The walk to the security office seemed endless. Dr. Wilson thought of all the years he'd spent building his career. Medical school, residency, fellowship, becoming chief of neurosurgery, 14 years of education and training, countless lives saved, research published in major journals. None of that mattered in this moment. To these officers and the onlookers, he was just a suspect. "In here," the female officer directed, opening a door to a small room with a table, 3 chairs, and no windows. The walls were bare except for a poster outlining airport security protocols. A camera blinked in one corner of the ceiling. "Please have a seat," she said, gesturing to the chair on the far side of the table. Dr. Wilson sat down, placing his carry-on bag on the floor beside him. The 2 officers remained standing, looking down at him. "I'd like to know exactly what I'm being accused of," Dr. Wilson said, meeting their gaze steadily. We received reports of theft from the luxury goods section of our main duty-free shop approximately 40 minutes ago, the male officer explained. Items valued at over $3,000 were taken. You match the description of the individual seen leaving the area around that time. What description exactly? Dr. Wilson asked, struggling to keep the frustration from his voice. The officers exchanged glances. Male, around 6 feet tall, dark complexion, wearing a dark suit, the female officer recited. Dr. Wilson almost laughed despite the situation. That could describe dozens of men in this airport right now. The description also mentioned a blue tie and glasses, she added. Dr. Wilson touched his red tie. My tie isn't blue, and I don't wear glasses. The male officer frowned. The witness seemed quite certain. Then the witness is mistaken, Dr. Wilson replied firmly. I arrived on Flight 237 from Geneva. It landed at Gate C-42. I walked directly from there to baggage claim. I did not enter any shops. You can verify this with airport cameras. We'll need to check your bags, the male officer said, ignoring his explanation. Dr. Wilson spread his hands. Go ahead. You won't find anything because I didn't take anything. As the female officer began searching his carry-on, Dr. Wilson pulled out his phone. I told you. No phone calls until we're finished, the male officer snapped. I'm not making a call, Dr. Wilson replied calmly. I'm showing you my boarding pass and itinerary. He pulled up the airline app and turned the screen toward them. Flight 237 arrived at 2:15 p.m. You can check with the airline. The officer glanced at the screen but didn't seem impressed. Meanwhile, his colleague had emptied the contents of Dr. Wilson's carry-on onto the table. Laptop, chargers, a medical journal, toiletry bag, a change of clothes, and conference materials. Nothing here, she reported. What about his checked bag? The male officer asked. That bag contains only clothes and a few books, Dr. Wilson explained. But you're welcome to search it too. The female officer left to retrieve the suitcase from where they'd left it by the baggage carousel. Alone with the male officer, Dr. Wilson tried again. Look, this is clearly a misunderstanding. I understand you're doing your job, but I've missed connecting with my family who are waiting, and I have patients who need me back at the hospital tomorrow. Can we please speed this process up? Check the security footage from the shops and the terminal. You'll see I was nowhere near that duty-free shop. The officer's expression softened slightly. We're already pulling footage. If you're telling the truth, you'll be on your way soon. I am telling the truth, Dr. Wilson said quietly. The door opened and the female officer returned with his suitcase. She began a thorough search while the male officer received a call on his radio. He stepped into the hallway to take it. Dr. Wilson watched as the contents of his carefully packed suitcase were removed and examined. Suits for the conference, dress shirts, casual clothes for the trip home, toiletries, books on the latest neurosurgical techniques, and a small gift bag containing chocolates and a small wooden music box he'd bought for his wife and children. What's this? The female officer asked, holding up the gift bag. Souvenirs for my family, Dr. Wilson replied. The receipt is in there if you want to check. She found the receipt and examined it, then continued her search, finding nothing suspicious. The male officer returned, his face unreadable. They're reviewing the security footage now, he told Dr. Wilson. It shouldn't be much longer. Dr. Wilson nodded, feeling a mix of relief and lingering anger. The evidence would clear him, but the damage of being publicly escorted away like a criminal had already been done. As they waited, he noticed the female officer looking more closely at the conference materials spread on the table. She picked up his presenter badge, which displayed his name and title clearly. Dr. Alexander Wilson, MD, PhD, Chief of Neurosurgery. Her eyes widened slightly, and she glanced at him with a new expression, something between surprise and uncertainty. She showed the badge to her colleague, whose demeanor visibly shifted. You're a brain surgeon? The male officer asked, his voice notably different from the harsh tone he'd used earlier. Yes, Dr. Wilson replied simply. I was in Geneva presenting research on a new surgical approach for treating certain types of brain tumors. The radio crackled again. The male officer answered it, listened for a moment, then acknowledged the message. They've reviewed the initial footage, he said, turning to Dr. Wilson. You don't appear to have entered the duty-free area at all since arriving. As I told you, Dr. Wilson said, the relief at being vindicated tempered by the frustration of the entire experience. There's more, the officer continued. They've identified another individual who matches the updated description from our witness. Security is approaching them now. The atmosphere in the small room had changed completely. Both officers now seemed uncomfortable, avoiding direct eye contact with Dr. Wilson. "So I'm free to go?" he asked, already starting to gather his scattered belongings. "Yes, sir," the female officer said quickly. "We apologize for the inconvenience." As Dr. Wilson repacked his bags, he wondered how many others had sat in this same chair, facing the same accusations, without the benefit of security footage or the sudden respect that came with his title. The thought troubled him deeply. Outside, his family would still be waiting, worried now about his unexplained delay. And beyond this incident, he knew there would be more to deal with, not just the personal impact, but the larger questions this raised. For now, though, he just wanted to get home. What none of them realized was that this incident, unpleasant as it was, would soon take a turn that would stun everyone involved. Dr. Wilson sat in the small security room, watching as the officers scrambled to repack his belongings. Their hands moved quickly but clumsily, trying to fold his clothes with a newfound carefulness that hadn't been present when they dumped everything out. The female officer accidentally knocked his medical journal to the floor and quickly retrieved it, brushing off the cover as if that could somehow make up for the last 30 minutes. Again, "We apologize for the misunderstanding," the male officer said, not quite meeting Dr. Wilson's eyes. "These situations require us to act quickly based on the information available." Dr. Wilson nodded but remained silent. The initial shock of being accused had faded, replaced by a heavy feeling in his chest, a mixture of anger, humiliation, and a deep tiredness that had nothing to do with his long flight. "Is there anything else we can do for you, sir?" the female officer asked, zipping up his suitcase. "Yes," Dr. Wilson finally spoke. "I'd like to speak with your supervisor." The officers exchanged glances. "Of course," the male officer replied after a beat. "I'll call him right away." As the officer stepped away to use his radio, Dr. Wilson checked his phone. 4 missed calls from his wife and a string of increasingly worried text messages. "Where are you? We've been waiting for almost an hour. Is everything okay? Please call me. The kids are getting restless. Should we park and come find you? Seriously worried now. Please respond." He quickly typed back, "I'm fine. Got held up with airport security. A mistake. Will explain later. Should be out in about 15 minutes. So sorry." 3 dots appeared immediately, showing she was typing a response. Before it came through, the door opened again. A tall man in a dark blue uniform with more badges and insignia than the other officers entered the room. He had silver-streaked hair and deep lines around his eyes that suggested both age and stress. "Dr. Wilson, I'm Chief Officer Reyes, head of security for this terminal." He introduced himself, extending his hand. "I understand there's been an unfortunate situation." Dr. Wilson shook his hand briefly. "That's one way to put it." Reyes pulled up a chair across from him while the other officer stood awkwardly by the door. "I've reviewed what happened," Reyes said, his tone professional but sympathetic. "We received a report of high-value items stolen from our premium duty-free shop. The initial description we got was vague, a tall man in a dark suit. When my officers saw you at baggage claim, they made an assumption." "An assumption," Dr. Wilson repeated, the word hanging in the air between them. Reyes had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Yes, and for that I offer our sincere apologies." The witness later clarified the suspect was wearing glasses and had a distinctive blue tie, which obviously doesn't match your appearance. "That clarification came after I was already detained and my bag searched," Dr. Wilson pointed out, "after people saw me being escorted away like a criminal." "You're right," Reyes acknowledged. "And I take full responsibility for how this was handled. My officers should have verified the description more thoroughly before approaching you. They should have checked the security footage first." Dr. Wilson's phone buzzed again with a text from his wife. "Thank God you're okay. We'll keep circling. Let us know when you're coming out." He looked up at Reyes. "I need to get to my family. They've been waiting for over an hour." "Of course," Reyes stood up. "We'll escort you directly to the pickup area. Your wife can pull up to the priority loading zone. I'll have someone guide her there." "That won't be necessary," Dr. Wilson said firmly as he stood. "I'd prefer to walk out on my own." Reyes nodded, understanding the unspoken message. Dr. Wilson didn't want any more escorts. "Before I go," Dr. Wilson added, "I'd like to know what happens now. How do you plan to address what happened here today?" Reyes straightened his shoulders slightly. We'll conduct a full review of the incident and our procedures. The officers involved will receive additional training on proper identification protocols and unconscious bias awareness. And the security footage? Dr. Wilson asked. I want a copy. That's against our usual policy. But under the circumstances, Reyes hesitated, then continued. I can arrange for your attorney to review it, should you wish to pursue this matter further. The implication was clear. They were worried about legal action, as they should be. Dr. Wilson gathered his carry-on bag. The two original officers had finished repacking his suitcase and now stood by the door, looking like they wished they could disappear into the walls. One more thing, Dr. Wilson said, pausing at the doorway. Has the real suspect been caught? We're still investigating, Reyes replied carefully. But yes, we have detained another individual whose appearance and movements more closely match the updated description and the security footage. Dr. Wilson nodded. I hope you're being more thorough with your evidence this time. With that, he walked out of the room, pulling his suitcase behind him. The hallway seemed longer walking out than it had coming in. As he approached the main terminal area, he could feel his heart rate increasing. Would people still be staring? Would they remember seeing him being led away earlier? The bustling noise of the terminal enveloped him as he emerged from the security area. Travelers rushed past, focused on their own journeys, their own worries. Most paid no attention to him. A few glanced his way but quickly returned to their phones or companions. The anonymity was a relief. Dr. Wilson made his way toward the exit, navigating through the crowd. As he neared the doors leading to the pickup area, he noticed a small commotion near another security checkpoint. A group of officers surrounded someone he couldn't see clearly from this distance. Was this the real suspect they'd mentioned? For a moment he considered going closer, curious about who had been mistaken for him, or rather who he had been mistaken for. But the thought of his family waiting pushed that curiosity aside. He continued toward the exit. Outside, the late afternoon sun was blinding after the artificial lighting of the terminal. Dr. Wilson squinted, scanning the line of cars circling the pickup area. He spotted his family's blue SUV approaching and felt a wave of relief wash over him. His wife rolled down the window, her face a mixture of worry and joy. There you are. What happened? I'll explain in the car, he said, loading his luggage into the trunk. Let's just get out of here. Once inside, with the doors closed against the noise of the airport, his 6-year-old son launched immediately into excited chatter from the back seat. Dad, we made you signs, but they got all bent because we had to hold them for so long. And then Mom said we had to put them away because we had to keep driving around and around and around. His daughter, 9 and already showing signs of her mother's perceptiveness, studied his face. Are you okay, Dad? You look upset. His wife reached over and squeezed his hand. What happened in there? Your text scared me half to death. Dr. Wilson took a deep breath, considering how much to share with the children listening from the back seat. There was a mix-up with security. They thought I matched the description of someone who had taken something from a shop. His wife's eyes widened. They thought you were a thief? That's ridiculous. They were looking for someone in a dark suit, he explained, the absurdity of it hitting him again. Apparently that was enough to detain me and search my bags. But that could be half the men getting off planes, she exclaimed, then lowered her voice. Was it because... She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. They both knew what she was asking. I don't know for sure, he replied honestly, but I suspect it played a role in their quick judgment. From the back seat came his daughter's voice, quiet but clear. Was it because of your skin color, Dad? The question hung in the air. Dr. Wilson turned to look at his children. His son was too young to fully understand, still playing with a toy airplane, but his daughter watched him with eyes that seemed older than her years. Maybe, he admitted gently. Sometimes people make quick judgments based on what someone looks like rather than who they really are. That's not fair, she stated simply. No, it's not, he agreed. His wife pulled the car away from the airport, merging into the highway traffic. Are you going to do something about this? Call a lawyer? Dr. Wilson leaned back in his seat, the events of the day catching up with him. I'm not sure yet. Part of me wants to put it behind us and move on. But another part knows it could happen to someone else, she finished for him. He nodded. Exactly. They drove in silence for a few minutes, the hum of the road filling the car. Dr. Wilson watched the airport shrink in the side mirror until it disappeared from view. But the feelings from the incident, the humiliation, the anger, the sense of powerlessness despite all his accomplishments, those remained. His phone buzzed with an email notification. He almost ignored it, wanting to focus on being present with his family after the ordeal. But something made him check the screen. The email was from an address he didn't recognize, but the subject line caught his attention. Airport security incident, important information. What is it? His wife asked, noticing his expression change. I'm not sure, he replied, opening the email. But I think this situation may not be over yet. As he began to read, he realized that what had started as a case of mistaken identity was about to become something much bigger, something that would indeed stun everyone involved, himself included. The truth behind today's events was only just beginning to unfold. Dr. Wilson sat at his kitchen table that evening, the house finally quiet after putting the kids to bed. The excitement of his return had been dampened by the airport incident. Though he'd done his best to shift focus to the small gifts he'd brought back from Geneva and stories of the massive fountain he'd seen in the city center, his daughter had asked more questions about what happened at the airport, her young mind trying to make sense of injustice. His son, thankfully, had been more interested in whether Daddy had seen any cool airplanes. Now, with a cup of tea growing cold beside him, Dr. Wilson opened his laptop to reread the email that had arrived just as they were leaving the airport. From lchencapitalnewsnetwork.com, subject, Airport Security Incident. Important information, Dr. Wilson, my name is Linda Chen, investigative reporter with Capital News Network. I was at the International Terminal this afternoon working on a story about summer travel patterns when I witnessed security officers detaining you. I recorded parts of the incident as it appeared concerning. After making some calls, I learned you are Dr. Alexander Wilson, Chief of Neurosurgery at Memorial Hospital and a leading researcher in your field. I also discovered this wasn't an isolated incident at this airport. I've been investigating a pattern of potentially discriminatory security practices for the past 3 months. Your experience may connect to this larger story. If you're willing to discuss what happened, I believe it could help bring important issues to light. I understand this is a personal matter and respect if you prefer privacy. Either way, I thought you should know about the broader context. You can reach me at this email or at the number below. Regards, Linda Chen, Senior Investigative Reporter, Capital News Network. Dr. Wilson leaned back in his chair, considering the implications. His wife walked in from the living room and placed a hand on his shoulder. Still thinking about that email? She asked, glancing at the screen. Yeah, he replied. What would you do? She pulled out a chair and sat beside him. Honestly, part of me wants you to let it go. You've got surgeries scheduled this week, that big research grant application due, the kids' activity, she sighed. But then I think about what happened today, and how easily it could happen to someone else, someone without your credentials to make them suddenly apologetic. Dr. Wilson nodded. That was exactly what had been eating at him. The way the officer's demeanor had shifted when they realized he was a neurosurgeon, the implied suggestion that the mistake was more serious because of who he was, rather than simply because it was wrong. There's more to it than just what happened to me, he said, scrolling through the email again. This reporter thinks it's part of a pattern. Do you trust her? His wife asked. Reporters can sometimes make things seem bigger than they are for a story. I don't know her, he admitted. But I can look her up, see if her reporting seems legitimate. He opened a new browser tab and searched for Linda Chen, Capital News Network. Several articles appeared along with a professional profile. Her recent work included investigations into housing discrimination, healthcare disparities, and an award-winning series on education funding inequities. She seems credible, he said, showing his wife the search results. And if there really is a pattern of this happening at the airport. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unfamiliar number. Dr. Wilson, this is Linda Chen from CNN, the news network, not the other one. Just checking if you received my email. No pressure, but if you'd like to talk, I'm available tomorrow. There are some details I think you should be aware of. His wife read the message over his shoulder. Looks like she's persistent. I'm going to call her, he decided, just to hear what she knows. That doesn't commit me to anything. His wife squeezed his arm. I support whatever you decide. Just remember, you don't owe anyone your story if you don't want to share it. Dr. Wilson nodded gratefully and stepped into his home office to make the call. The reporter answered on the second ring. Dr. Wilson, thank you for calling. Linda Chen's voice was clear and professional. I appreciate you taking the time. I'm just curious about what you mentioned in your email, he replied. You said what happened to me might be part of a pattern. Yes, she confirmed. For the past 3 months, I've been gathering data on security incidents at 5 major airports, including yours. I've documented 27 cases where passengers were detained or searched based on what appears to be racial profiling rather than specific evidence. Dr. Wilson felt a chill. 27 cases? Just in 3 months? Those are only the ones I could verify, she replied. Most people don't report these incidents. They just want to get home and forget about it. And you happened to be there when I was detained? Not exactly by chance, she admitted. I spend 3 days a week at different terminals observing security practices for my investigation. But witnessing what happened to you, a distinguished physician being treated that way, highlights how pervasive the problem is. Dr. Wilson processed this information. What exactly are you asking from me? Ideally, an interview about your experience, she replied. But before you decide, there's something else you should know. The security footage from today? I've seen it. That caught him by surprise. How? The head of security told me even I couldn't get a copy without going through legal channels. I have sources inside airport operations, she explained. The footage shows something interesting. The person they eventually detained, the actual suspect, looks nothing like you beyond being a man in a suit. He's shorter, lighter-skinned, and was indeed wearing glasses and a blue tie, just as they described in the updated description they claimed to have. Dr. Wilson frowned. What are you suggesting? I believe they never had a vague description. I think they targeted you first, then created a more specific description that didn't match you only after realizing their mistake. The timeline of radio communications supports this theory. The implications were disturbing. Not just a mistake, but a deliberate attempt to cover up profiling. If you're right, Dr. Wilson said slowly, that makes what happened even worse. Yes, Chen agreed. And you may not be aware, but 3 months ago the airport implemented new security protocols they claimed would be more efficient. Complaints of discriminatory treatment have increased 64% since then. Dr. Wilson thought about his daughter's simple but profound observation. That's not fair. He thought about his colleagues, his patients, his friends who might face the same treatment. I need to think about this, he told the reporter. Can I call you tomorrow? Of course, she replied. Take all the time you need. After ending the call, Dr. Wilson rejoined his wife in the kitchen and relayed the conversation. So what are you thinking? She asked when he'd finished. I'm thinking about my patients, he said. Did I ever tell you about Mr. Rivera? She shook her head. He came to me with headaches that 4 other doctors had dismissed as stress or migraines. When I ordered the MRI that found his tumor, he broke down crying. Not because of the diagnosis, but because someone finally listened to him. Dr. Wilson paused. People with power need to use it to help those who aren't being heard. His wife reached across the table and took his hand. You want to speak up? I think I need to, he replied. But I'm also worried about dragging our family into a public story. We can handle it, she assured him. The kids too. Better they learn about standing up for what's right than learning to stay quiet when things are wrong. Later that night, as they got ready for bed, Dr. Wilson received another email. This one wasn't from the reporter, but from a Dr. Thompson, chief of surgery at his hospital. The subject line read, Saw the news about the airport incident. Call me. News? There hadn't been any news stories yet. Dr. Wilson quickly searched online and found a brief article on a local news site. Prominent neurosurgeon wrongfully detained at International Airport. The article was vague with no names mentioned, but described a leading brain surgeon returning from an international medical conference being detained by airport security in what sources called a case of apparent racial profiling. Word was already getting out. Dr. Wilson forwarded the article to his wife, who was in the bathroom getting ready for bed. Did you see this? She called out a moment later. Just found it, he replied. Looks like the decision might be getting made for me. The next morning, Dr. Wilson arrived at the hospital earlier than usual. He had 2 surgeries scheduled, a tumor resection and a repair of an arteriovenous malformation. But first, He needed to meet with Dr. Thompson. The chief of surgery was already in his office when Dr. Wilson knocked on the door. "Come in, Alex," Dr. Thompson called. He was an older man with salt and pepper hair who'd been running the department for over a decade. "Close the door, please." Dr. Wilson sat across from him, unsure what to expect. "I heard about what happened at the airport," Dr. Thompson began. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," Dr. Wilson replied, somewhat surprised by the concern in his colleague's voice. "Good." Dr. Thompson nodded. "Because the hospital's public relations office has already received 3 calls from media outlets asking for comment." Now it made sense. This wasn't just personal concern. It was damage control. "I haven't spoken to any reporters," Dr. Wilson clarified. "I know," Dr. Thompson replied, "but someone has. And now the hospital board is concerned about potential negative publicity." Dr. Wilson felt a flicker of irritation. Shouldn't they be more concerned about one of their department chiefs being wrongfully detained? Dr. Thompson sighed. "They are, Alex, or at least I am. But you know how these things work. The board wants to know how we're handling the situation." "I'm not sure there's a situation to handle," Dr. Wilson said carefully, "unless the hospital is taking a position on how airport security conducts itself." "That's just it." Dr. Thompson leaned forward. "This could be an opportunity for the hospital to take a stance on an important issue, but it needs to be handled carefully." Dr. Wilson studied his colleague's face, trying to read between the lines. "What exactly are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting," Dr. Thompson replied, "that what happened to you matters beyond just one unfortunate incident. And how we respond to it matters too." As they continued their conversation, Dr. Wilson realized this was no longer just about him or even about airport security practices. It had become something bigger, something that could potentially impact real change. What had started as a routine return from a medical conference was quickly evolving into a pivotal moment, not just in Dr. Wilson's life, but possibly for many others as well. Dr. Wilson stood at the scrub sink, methodically washing his hands before his first surgery of the day. The familiar routine, soap up to the elbows, rinse, repeat, usually helped clear his mind. Today, though, his thoughts kept circling back to his conversation with Dr. Thompson and the decision he needed to make. A nurse helped him into his gown and gloves, then pushed open the door to the operating room with her back. "Good morning, everyone." Dr. Wilson greeted his surgical team as he entered. 6 faces turned toward him, some showing a flicker of recognition that went beyond the usual professional acknowledgement. Word was spreading. "Patient is prepped and stable," the anesthesiologist reported, his eyes lingering on Dr. Wilson a beat longer than normal. Dr. Wilson nodded and took his position at the head of the table, under the bright lights, looking down at the draped patient whose life was literally in his hands. The airport incident seemed far away. Here in this room, he was defined solely by his skill and knowledge. No one questioned his right to be here or mistook him for something he wasn't. "Scalpel," he said, extending his hand. For the next 4 hours, Dr. Wilson existed in the focused world of brain surgery, where nothing mattered except the delicate tissue before him and the steady rhythm of the patient's vital signs. It wasn't until he was closing the final layer that he allowed himself to think again about Linda Chen's revelations and Dr. Thompson's carefully worded suggestion after completing both scheduled surgeries and checking on his post-op patients. Dr. Wilson finally returned to his office. 27 new emails waited in his inbox, including 3 from the hospital's public relations department, requesting an urgent meeting, and 1 from Linda Chen with the subject line, "New development, please call." He called Chen first. "Dr. Wilson, thank you for calling back," she answered promptly. "There's been a significant development in the airport story." "What kind of development?" he asked, suddenly wary. "The security officer who first approached you has come forward," Chen explained. "He's willing to speak on the record about the racial profiling policy at the airport." Dr. Wilson sat up straighter. "What racial profiling policy? I thought this was about individual officers making bad judgment calls." "That's what airport management claims," Chen replied. "But according to Officer Bryant 3 months ago, security staff received new behavioral detection guidelines that included racial and ethnic indicators as risk factors." "That can't be legal," Dr. Wilson said. "It's not, which is why it wasn't written down explicitly," Chen explained. But Officer Bryant says the training sessions made it clear certain groups should receive additional scrutiny. He says he's been uncomfortable with it from the start, but your case was the tipping point for him. Dr. Wilson absorbed this information. Why? What was different about my case? Two things, Chen said. First, the obvious wrongness of it, detaining someone who clearly didn't match the supposed description. Second, he recognized your name after the fact. Your team saved his nephew's life last year, removed a brain tumor other doctors said was inoperable. The connection startled Dr. Wilson. The medical world could be surprisingly small sometimes, but he operated on dozens of patients each month. He couldn't recall the specific case without checking records. He wants to meet you, Chen continued, and he's willing to go on the record about the discriminatory practices, but he wanted me to talk to you first. Dr. Wilson glanced at his watch. His next patient consultation wasn't for another hour. Where is he now? At my office downtown, Chen replied. He's on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. I can be there in 30 minutes, Dr. Wilson decided. As he drove to the news network building, Dr. Wilson called his wife to let her know he'd be late getting home. He briefly explained the new developments. Be careful, she cautioned. This is getting bigger than just telling your story. I know, he replied. But if what this officer says is true, it's important. The Capital News Network occupied several floors of a glass-fronted building downtown. Linda Chen met Dr. Wilson in the lobby, a petite woman with short black hair and alert eyes that missed nothing. She led him to a conference room where a man in his early 30s waited, nervously tapping his fingers on the table. Dr. Wilson. This is Officer Kevin Bryant, Chen introduced them. Bryant stood quickly, extending his hand. Thank you for meeting me, Dr. Wilson. I want to apologize for what happened at the airport. I was following protocol, but that's no excuse. Dr. Wilson shook his hand, studying the younger man's face. Bryant looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes suggesting sleepless nights. Ms. Chen tells me you have information about airport security practices, Dr. Wilson said as they all sat down. Bryant nodded. 3 months ago, we got new training on what they called enhanced behavioral detection. On paper, it's about spotting suspicious behavior patterns. In practice, we were told to pay special attention to certain types of travelers. Based on race? Dr. Wilson asked directly. They never said that explicitly, Bryant clarified. They used terms like statistical risk profiles and demographic patterns associated with certain types of criminal activity. But the message was clear when they showed us who to watch more carefully. And you followed these instructions, Dr. Wilson stated rather than asked. Bryant looked down at his hands. Yes, until yesterday. He looked up again, meeting Dr. Wilson's gaze. My nephew Ty had a brain tumor last year. The doctors at County said it was too risky to operate. Then he got referred to you and you took it out. He's back in school now, playing basketball again. Dr. Wilson now remembered the case, a challenging tumor in a 16-year-old boy. I'm glad he's doing well. You saved his life, Bryant said simply. And yesterday I put you through that humiliating experience because of... He struggled for words. Because of policies I knew weren't right. When I realized who you were afterward, something just broke inside me. I couldn't keep being part of this. Linda Chen, who had been quietly taking notes, looked up. Officer Bryant has provided us with dates and times of the training sessions, names of instructors, and specific language used. He's also given us data showing the disproportionate targeting of minorities for random searches and detentions. Dr. Wilson considered this information. What happens next? I'm preparing an investigative report, Chen explained. With both your testimonies, plus the data and documentation, we can expose these practices. But I wanted you both to meet first, and for you to understand what you'd be part of if you decide to go public with your experience. Bryant leaned forward. Dr. Wilson, I know asking for your help is rich coming from me, but people listen to someone like you in a way they don't listen to someone like me. If you speak up about what happened, it could force real changes. Dr. Wilson thought about his conversation with Dr. Thompson that morning. The hospital administration was already bracing for publicity. Maybe he could channel that into something positive. I need to make a few calls, he said. Stepping outside the conference room, Dr. Wilson called Dr. Thompson directly. I've been thinking about our conversation, Dr. Wilson said after exchanging brief greetings. You mentioned the hospital taking a stance on an important issue. I think I know what that issue should be. He explained the revelations about the airport's apparent profiling policies and the officer who had come forward. This isn't just about what happened to me, Dr. Wilson concluded. It's a systemic problem affecting many people. The hospital has a chance to stand up for equal treatment and dignity for everyone, patients, staff, and community members. There was a pause on the line. The board meeting is in 1 hour, Dr. Thompson finally said. Can you be there to present this yourself? I'll be there, Dr. Wilson promised. When he returned to the conference room, both Chen and Bryant looked at him expectantly. I'm meeting with our hospital board in an hour, he told them. I'm going to ask them to take a public position against discriminatory security practices and to support a full investigation into what's happening at the airport. Chen's eyes widened slightly. That would be significant. A major medical institution adding its voice could change the conversation entirely. Before I do that, Dr. Wilson continued, turning to Bryant, I need to know you're certain about going public. This could impact your career. Bryant nodded solemnly. My career in airport security is probably over either way, but I can at least try to fix what I helped break. He paused. My nephew looks up to me, thinks I'm some kind of hero. I want to deserve that. The hospital board meeting was already underway when Dr. Wilson arrived, slightly out of breath from rushing across town. 12 people sat around a large mahogany table, physicians, administrators, and community representatives who governed the hospital's operations. Dr. Thompson had secured him a 10-minute slot to speak. As Dr. Wilson laid out what he had learned about the airport's practices and his own experience, the room grew increasingly quiet. Memorial Hospital has always prided itself on serving everyone in our community with dignity and respect, he concluded. We have an opportunity now to extend those values beyond our walls by taking a stand against discriminatory practices that harm the very people we serve. The board chair, a silver-haired woman who had led the hospital through 2 decades of growth, spoke first after Dr. Wilson finished. What exactly are you proposing, Dr. Wilson? 3 things, he replied confidently. First, that the hospital issue a public statement supporting a full investigation into airport security practices. Second, that we offer our data on how discriminatory treatment affects health outcomes in our community. And third, that we convene a public forum where people can share their experiences with profiling and its impact on their lives. The discussion that followed was intense, but focused. Some board members expressed concerns about stepping into a politically charged issue. Others worried about potential backlash. But most recognized the alignment with the hospital's core mission of caring for the community's well-being. In the end, the vote was 10-2 in favor of Dr. Wilson's proposal. As he left the boardroom, his phone buzzed with a text from Linda Chen. Airport director just announced an immediate review of security practices. They're feeling the pressure already. This is happening. Dr. Wilson smiled to himself as he headed to his car. What had begun as a humiliating, unjust experience was transforming into something powerful, a catalyst for change that could benefit countless others. That evening, as he pulled into his driveway, Dr. Wilson spotted his daughter sitting on the front steps, clearly waiting for him. As he got out of the car, she ran to meet him. Dad, Mom told me you're going to be on the news talking about what happened at the airport. Dr. Wilson hugged her. Probably, yes. Is that okay with you? She looked up at him with serious eyes. Are you going to make things fair? He smiled at her simple but profound question. I'm going to try my best. Good, she nodded decisively. My teacher says we should always speak up when things aren't right. Your teacher is very wise, Dr. Wilson replied, taking her hand as they walked toward the house. Inside, his wife was preparing dinner while his son built an elaborate airport out of blocks on the living room floor. Normal family life continuing despite the extraordinary events unfolding around them. Yet Dr. Wilson knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges. As the story broke wide open and his identity, not just as a victim of profiling but as someone fighting back against it, would be revealed to the world. The morning after the hospital board meeting, Dr. Wilson woke to the sound of his phone buzzing incessantly. Text messages, email notifications, and calls were pouring in. Linda Chen's investigative report had gone live online at midnight, and the local morning news shows had picked up the story. His wife rolled over, blinking sleepily. It's starting, isn't it? He nodded, scrolling through the messages. Colleagues expressing support. Friends checking if he was okay. A few angry texts from numbers he didn't recognize, which he deleted without reading fully. "You should see this," his wife said, now looking at her own phone. She handed it to him, opened to a social media page where the story was spreading rapidly. The comment section was a battleground of opinions, many supportive, some skeptical, others openly hostile. "Maybe we should keep the kids home from school today," he suggested, concerned about how they might be affected. His wife shook her head. "They'll have to face it sometime. Better with the routine of school around them. I've already talked to their teachers." As if on cue, their daughter appeared in the doorway, already dressed in her school clothes. "Dad, you're trending," she announced matter-of-factly. Dr. Wilson couldn't help but smile at her casual use of the term. "Is that a good thing?" She shrugged. "My friend Taylor says her mom cried when she read the article. She says you're brave." The simplicity of the child's perspective was refreshing amid the storm of adult reactions. Dr. Wilson got out of bed and knelt to her level. "Remember what we talked about? Some people might say things about our family in the coming days. Some nice, some not so nice," she nodded solemnly. "Because some people don't like it when you speak up." "That's right. But we speak up anyway," he reminded her. "Because it's right," she finished. After getting the kids off to school, Dr. Wilson prepared for his own day. He had arranged to take a week of administrative leave from surgeries, though he would still oversee his department and check on his patients. The hospital's public relations team had set up a press conference for noon. As he knotted his tie, a deep burgundy one he saved for important occasions, his phone rang. The caller ID showed it was Dr. Thompson. "Have you seen the statement from the airport authority?" Dr. Thompson asked without preamble. "Not yet," Dr. Wilson replied. "I've been trying to get the kids ready for school. They're announcing a comprehensive review of security practices and have placed the head of security on administrative leave," Dr. Thompson reported. "They're also claiming the incidents were isolated lapses in judgment rather than policy." "Of course they are," Dr. Wilson sighed. "That contradicts what Officer Bryant has documented." "Exactly. Which is why today's press conference is critical," Dr. Thompson emphasized. "The hospital's official statement backs you and the investigation fully, but your personal testimony will be what people remember." After finishing the call, Dr. Wilson found his wife in the kitchen, preparing lunch boxes for the kids' next school day, a normal task on this most abnormal of days. "How are you feeling about all this?" he asked her. She set down the sandwich she was wrapping and turned to face him. "Proud, worried, both." She studied his face. "How are you feeling?" "The same," he admitted. "Plus a bit overwhelmed by how quickly everything is moving." She stepped closer and straightened his tie, a familiar gesture that somehow grounded him. "Just remember why you're doing this. It's not about headlines or trending or even about what happened to you specifically. It's about fixing something broken so it doesn't hurt other people." Dr. Wilson pressed his forehead against hers for a moment. "When did you get so wise?" "I've always been the brains of this operation, Dr. Fancy Surgeon," she teased, lightening the moment. "Now go make us proud." The hospital auditorium was packed by the time Dr. Wilson arrived for the press conference. Television cameras lined the back wall. Reporters filled the seats normally occupied by medical students attending lectures. Hospital staff stood along the sides, many wearing their white coats or scrubs, a visible show of support that moved him deeply. Linda Chen was there too, positioned near the front with her notebook ready. Beside her sat Officer Bryant, looking uncomfortable in civilian clothes but determined. Dr. Wilson caught their eyes and nodded slightly in acknowledgement. Dr. Thompson opened the proceedings with the hospital's official statement, his measured voice bringing a sense of gravity to the room. "Memorial Hospital has always stood for equal treatment and dignity for all people. When one of our most respected physicians experienced discriminatory treatment at our city's airport, we recognize not just an isolated incident, but a symptom of a larger problem that affects many in our community. We call for a transparent investigation into these practices and commit our full support to creating safer, more just public spaces for everyone." Then it was Dr. Wilson's turn at the microphone. He had prepared remarks, but as he looked out at the sea of faces, he decided to speak from the heart instead. 3 days ago, I was returning from presenting medical research that could help save lives. I was thinking about seeing my family and getting back to my patients. Instead, I was publicly detained and accused of theft based on nothing more than a vague description that could have fit countless travelers. He paused, making eye contact with various people in the audience. What happened to me was humiliating and unjust. But what makes it truly unacceptable is that it wasn't random or accidental. We now have evidence that security personnel were trained to view certain people who look like me, as inherently more suspicious. Murmurs rippled through the audience. Dr. Wilson continued, his voice gaining strength. I could have stayed quiet. As a doctor, I have privileges and protections many others don't. Security officers became very apologetic once they realized I was a neurosurgeon. But their apologies shouldn't have depended on my title. They should have been sorry because what they did was wrong. Period, regardless of who I was. He glanced toward Bryant, who gave him a small nod of encouragement. I'm speaking out because this isn't just about one incident or one person. It's about a system that allows prejudice to masquerade as security. It's about countless others who have faced similar treatment, but didn't have a platform to speak up. It's about making sure my children grow up in a world where they're judged by their character, not their appearance. Questions came rapidly after he finished his statement. Dr. Wilson answered them calmly and directly, neither minimizing what had happened, nor allowing anger to overshadow his message. When asked about potential legal action against the airport, he redirected the focus. This isn't about lawsuits or personal compensation. It's about fixing broken systems. I'm more interested in policy changes that protect everyone than in any settlement for myself. After the formal press conference ended, Dr. Wilson spoke individually with several reporters. One question in particular stuck with him, from a young journalist who asked, "What would you say to other professionals of color who face discrimination but worry about speaking up?" Dr. Wilson considered his answer carefully. I'd say that silence often feels safer in the moment, but it rarely leads to change. Each person must make their own choice based on their circumstances. But I believe we have the most impact when we use whatever platforms we have to speak truth. The story dominated local news that evening and began spreading nationally by the next day. Dr. Wilson's phone continued buzzing with messages, including one that particularly touched him, from a medical student who wrote, "Watching you stand up makes me believe I can succeed in this field without hiding who I am." 3 weeks later, Dr. Wilson stood in a community center downtown, looking out at a packed room. The public forum he had proposed to the hospital board had expanded into something much larger, a citywide town hall on discriminatory practices in public institutions. The mayor sat in the front row. Representatives from the airport authority, police department, and public schools were present. Local civil rights organizations had helped organize the event. Officer Bryant was there too, now working with a community oversight committee after resigning from his airport security position. The whistleblower had paid a price for his courage, but like Dr. Wilson, he had found purpose in advocacy. As Dr. Wilson prepared to moderate the discussion, his wife squeezed his hand. She had taken the day off work to be there. Their children were in school, but his daughter had helped him practice his opening remarks the night before, solemnly informing him when he was using too many big doctor words. "Good evening, everyone," he began. "Thank you for coming. Today isn't about assigning blame or dwelling on past wrongs. It's about listening to experiences that have gone unheard, understanding patterns that have gone unacknowledged, and creating solutions that serve everyone equally." The first speaker approached the microphone, an elderly man who described being repeatedly pulled aside for random searches whenever he traveled while wearing his religious head covering. As he spoke, Dr. Wilson noticed airport officials in the audience shifting uncomfortably but, importantly, listening. Throughout the evening, more people shared their stories. Some were angry, others tearful, many determined. The common thread was the relief of finally being heard and taken seriously. Institutional representatives who had come prepared with defensive talking points gradually shifted to asking questions and taking notes. Near the end of the forum, Linda Chen provided an update on her ongoing investigation, which had now documented over 50 cases similar to Dr. Wilson's. More importantly, she reported that the airport had agreed to an independent audit of their security practices and training materials. "This is just the beginning," she emphasized, "but it's a beginning we wouldn't have had without people willing to speak up." As the forum concluded, people lingered, forming small groups to continue the conversations. Dr. Wilson found himself surrounded by well-wishers and others wanting to share their own experiences. He listened to each one, knowing that being heard was often the first step toward healing. Eventually, the crowd thinned. Dr. Wilson gathered his notes and prepared to leave when he noticed a teenage boy approaching hesitantly, accompanied by Officer Bryant. "Dr. Wilson," Bryant said, "this is my nephew, Ty, the one you operated on last year. He wanted to meet you again for a better reason this time." The boy extended his hand somewhat shyly. "Thank you for fixing my brain, Dr. Wilson. And thank you for helping my uncle do the right thing." Dr. Wilson shook his hand, struck by the full circle moment. "Thank you for giving us both the courage to speak up." As they walked to the car, his wife linked her arm through his. "So," she said, "what's next on your world-changing agenda, Dr. Wilson?" He laughed. "Right now, taking our kids for ice cream. The world-changing can wait until tomorrow." But they both knew the change had already begun, not just in policies or practices, but in the ripples of courage spreading outward from one person willing to stand up and say, "This isn't right." From being wrongfully accused to becoming a catalyst for justice, Dr. Wilson had transformed an ugly incident into a powerful movement for change. And that perhaps was the most stunning outcome of all.